Quinton Hitchcock for joining us as an international affairs expert from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for joining us. Now we move on to our next news, to Asia. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an order to lower fentanyl-related tariffs on Chinese products, formalizing a key part of his deal with Chinese leader Xi Jinping after their first face-to-face talks in years. Shortly after returning to the presidency this year, Trump has imposed additional tariffs of 20% on goods from China over its alleged role in the fentanyl supply chain. But China has since committed efforts to halting the flow of precursors used to make fentanyl into the United States after Trump and Xi's summit last month in Busan, South Korea. In turn, Washington has pledged that it would cut its additional tariffs on Chinese imports from 20% to 10%, starting from November 10th. Now for this discussion, we welcome Gerald Alfil. He's an economist, joins us live from Dubai. Thank you very much, Gerald, for joining us again. Good to see you. Gerald, looking at this news and Trump and Xi's latest meeting, how do you analyze their relationship now and also the relationship of China and U.S.?
Good morning. Yes, it's about easing tensions. I'm taking the heat from the room in relation to tariffs and tit for tat in relation to global trade, because this affects global trade. And President Trump has received more and more critics from businessmen and women, but also from his own party. Mike Pompeo, for example, was here in Dubai a couple of weeks ago, criticized the Trump tariffs. He said they hurt the U.S. economy, and now they move forward. And I think the whole fentanyl discussion also and the whole issue is a bit a relict from the pandemic when it started, when the finger pointing started on China. Now the relation, going back to your question, is it's about finding common grounds, easing tensions, because also I was in China this summer, and definitely the domestic economy needs an upgrade, needs a boost, and both sides see now that the whole tariff tit for tat is hurting both economies.
And does Trump's decision to lower tariffs on Chinese goods do you think it signals a genuine improvement in their relations, or do you think it's just a temporary strategic move?
The question is difficult to answer because, as you indicate with your question, is that we saw in the past Trump has moved one step forward, but then two steps back. And officially, it shows a change of tone. Officially, it shows, informally, it shows a temporary change of tone, because they said we do this for a year and it's taking the heat off the room. But where the discussion was before with the other interlocutor about Mamdani, I think President Trump has now to look also on the domestic political issues, not only in relation to rise of Democrat socialists, but also in relation to the pressure on stock markets. Stock markets came under pressure. Also, crypto Bitcoin is now plummeting to $102 per coin. President Trump and his administration, also his family as a business party, is heavily promoting crypto and Web3 and digital assets. So I think he can now leave the foreign policy issues a bit aside, especially with China, and focus on domestic issues.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Gerald Alfil for sharing that insight as an economist. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, China unveils a new initiative to boost imports, positioning itself as a supersized market amid growing trade tensions with the United States. Commerce Minister Wang Wentao has announced the Big Market for All Export for China program, which will host 10 major trade events each year, featuring 5 to 6 countries. The goal is to make China the world's top export destination and strengthen global cooperation. Premier Li Qiang attended the launch in Shanghai ahead of the China International Import Expo, which starts today from November 5th to 10th. The initiative comes as China faces criticism that its import growth lags far behind its surging exports, fueling global trade imbalances. Despite efforts to showcase openness, the European Chamber of Commerce has called the expo more political than practical. Now we go back to welcoming Gerald Alfiel. He's an economist, joins us live from Dubai. Thank you very much, Gerald, for staying with us. Looking at this, to what extent can trade expos like these and large-scale import programs offset concerns about China's limited market access and protectionist policies, as EU has also criticized it as more political than practical?
If there's one thing China is good at in relation to global trade, then it's about organizing events. China has the venues, China has the capacities to link and to invite people quickly. I attended many events in China and also conference. I organized a conference myself in Xiamen last year in the Fujian province. It was about precious metals, and we could recruit a lot of delegates and participants. So China has the venues, China has the will, China has the connections, and the EU criticism, I think, is because the EU knows that China is good at these things. And another point also pro-China in this regard is that China just added Sweden to its visa-free scheme. That makes 48 countries which can travel, whose citizens can travel visa-free to China. And there are big countries, not only emerging markets, but also Japan, Korea, South Korea, Australia, Russia, France, Spain, Switzerland, my country, Germany. Visa-free travel is a very pretty fair persuader for business people to come and to do trade, and you just go into China like you change your living room. That wasn't possible before the pandemic, where the visa process was quite complicated and bureaucratic. So China is good at organizing conferences and events. They help, definitely. They connect, and they help also people to connect with each other, and also those who haven't been to China, and there are still many people who haven't been to China from the aforementioned countries, can see China on the ground. China needs, for example, support in relation to infrastructure upgrade, in technology. China is a leader, of course, in robotics and AI, but doesn't mean that there's also room for cooperation and there are common grounds to join hands. China thinks win-win. This kind of tit for tat and this kind of arm wrestling is not on China's mind, as I can say from 20 years of experience working with Chinese companies.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Gerald Alfiel for sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we're moving on. Taiwan's Foreign Minister Ling Hsia-lung has stated that China has added a lot of conditions to its attendance at next year's APEC summit in the Chinese city of Shenzhen, and has gone back on a commitment to allow equal participation. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation is one of the only international bodies that Chinese claimed Taiwan is a member of, and next November's summit will come as relations between Taiwan and China have plummeted amid a stepped-up Chinese military pressure campaign against the island. Taiwan has said that it has been promised by China last year the right to equal participation, and that the safety of its people attending would be guaranteed. Meanwhile, China's foreign ministry has stated that Taiwan's participation in APEC activities must comply with the One China principle, which Beijing views as meaning both sides of the Taiwan Strait belong to one country, something Taiwan's government rejects. Now we move on to our next news. According to the Civil Defense Office of Philippines, Typhoon Kalmaegi leaves at least 66 people dead. The storm, locally known as Tino, has battered major cities with powerful winds and devastating floods. Cebu province is the worst hit, with 49 fatalities reported. Videos show residents stranded on rooftops and vehicles swept away by raging waters. A military helicopter deployed for rescue operations crashed in Mindanao, killing all 6 crew members on board. Officials say rescue teams are struggling to reach affected areas as debris and floodwaters block roads. Winds of over 80 miles per hour continue to lash parts of the Visayas region, though the typhoon is now weakening as it moves towards the South China Sea. Cebu's governor has declared state of calamity, calling the flooding unprecedented. Relief operations are underway, but officials warn that the full scale of destruction is still emerging. And that's a wrap on the China report. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates.